Hello, and welcome to the Synth Explorer's first tutorial or first discussion of synthesizers. So today we're going to talk about some very inexpensive synthesizers, as I had to start over after a divorce. Right now you're looking at my studio that I had to sell, something I had built up over some 25 years of hard work, 25 years of spending, saving. It goes way back to the 1980s, where my first synth that I bought, it was a Roland Juno Alpha 2, a analog 8-voice, and later a Roland Rhodes and a Ensoniq EPS 16 plus sampler. And you're also looking at the P120 piano, which was one of Yamaha's best piano back then. And you see a rack of stuff too, for some things for guitar, some for mixing, microphone preamps, what have you. Because I recorded my first CD. My only CD was a solo piano CD, and it was an actual piano. It was a Steinway Boston, and I rented it, put it in the room, and set microphones up and recorded it as a solo piano. So it's kind of a wide-ranging, because I play guitar, I play keyboards, and I play piano and synthesizers. So it's kind of a wide-ranging studio. But looking at it, the pictures here, yeah, I certainly do miss it. And I had to start over. And this video is dealing with a very inexpensive Casio that I used to start over. Today, this Casio is right on sale for $350. I think it normally sells for $450. It's a 76-note keyboard, and it's a very playable keyboard, very controllable. You wouldn't think something this cheap and inexpensive would be very controllable, but yes, it's one of those keyboards that you can control, even though it's synth action. When I play piano on synth action, that's my test of how controllable it is, and it was very controllable. Much more controllable than some of my most expensive synths today. It's disappointing the kind of key beds they put in synths today. Very disappointing. The best keyboard I ever played was the first one I bought, the Juno Alpha 2. And that one had aftertouch, and it was extremely playable. The touch was extremely controllable. And since it was my first keyboard, since my first synthesizer, I had played organ and piano for 20 years before I bought that. Since it was my first keyboard, I just assumed they were all like that. But ever since the first one, they've all been worse. Only today am I getting piano key beds for digital pianos that are very good. So let's get back to our discussion. So this is your finding your way into synthesizers and exploring the possibilities of some of these cheap synths. So first I'm going to assume that you are already a musician and have some musician skills. So full-size keys are mandatory. You're not going to want, and this goes for beginners too, you're not going to want to buy mini keys or something that's non-standard. You want that first synth, that first keyboard, to be a standard full-size key. And even though there's no perfect standards for full-size keys, there's absolutely no standards for mini keys and mid-size keys. No standard whatsoever. You don't want to learn on a small keyboard. So the Casio is offering this full-size, and it's offering you 76 keys, which is very, very rare, extremely rare in this price range. And for those who like to play organ, Hammond organ, we have the drawbars in physical form on these, so you can just whip over there, move those little sliders, and get yourself a organ sound in seconds. But the other thing about this Casio is it's extremely complex. It has effects, it has pattern sequencing, it has tones that you can layer together, and sound design a little bit. Now, it's not a complete synthesizer. It's not a deep synthesizer, but for designing your first sounds and for dealing with all these complexities all at the same time, all in one box, it's a pretty darn good start. So right off the bat, we're assuming you have musician skills. If you do not have any skills whatsoever, like I said, this is still a good one to start with because you want to develop your skills. And then we have sound design. Sound design is the basics of everything this channel is about. We're looking to design sounds that work well with our compositions. And a lot of times we want to design sounds that nobody else ever heard. That's really cool. If you can make, if you can compose something and then put instruments, make your own instruments to it that are really identifiable as brand new and no one's ever heard these, man, you're really successful then. But most of the time we're just trying to design something that fits in, and getting that 1 in a billion design that nobody's ever heard of, that's going to be pretty difficult. Now, you can easily make designs that nobody ever heard of that are awful and not musical. You hear those all the time. That's not a problem. But to make something musical, playable, to put a melody to it, or to have a sweep or introduction type things, that gets a little more difficult. And the Casio also gives you these effects designs too. So with the effects design, you'll be learning about delays and reverbs and choruses and all these other things. So this Casio WK-7600, it's a real learning tool. And it must be popular because they've been making it for at least 15 years. The same one, no changes whatsoever. Just the same design, 15 or more years. And people are still buying it, or they would have discontinued it. They came out with a new version with a different sound bank, the CTX versions. But I thought that was going to replace WKs, but it didn't. WK's still around. So since I owned this for many, many years, and I eked everything I could out of it because I was an experienced keyboardist, an experienced sound designer, effects designer, experienced audio engineer, yet all the high quality stuff I had in my old studio, it's gone. And now I'm living in extreme poverty. In 2008, which was our depression, and rebuying the instruments I had before was impossible. But I still wanted to make music, and I started doing it on this Casio WK-7600. So with sound design, the Casio offers about maybe 33% of what you might find on a full-blown synth. So we're able to elongate. We can make pads out of short samples. We can filter them. Which means you can change the tone of them. And of course, you can always add EQ to things, which is always possible. So there was some limited design on it. And there is effects design too, and the effects list is fairly long. Not only is there choruses, reverbs, and delays, which are the basics of all effects, there's all kinds of other effects in there too. So it makes for a very good start to a synthesizer. And at the end of this introduction, you're going to see me play something that I designed completely on the WK-7600. Next, we're going to talk about one of the most powerful features on that Casio is pattern sequencing. Now, there's two kinds of sequencing. There's pattern sequencing and there's step sequencing. Step sequencing is something that the non-musicians have to use because they can't play a keyboard very well. For musicians, pattern sequencing is an extremely powerful sequencer. Extremely powerful. And what we're doing is pattern sequencing in the style. Now, the WK-7600 is called an arranger keyboard because you can play a style. There's built-in styles that the factory already made for you. You can play these styles by just playing a chord. You play one chord and up to eight instruments in a band will accompany you. And as you play a different chord, all the pitches except drums, the drums won't change pitch, but all the pitched instruments will change. So if you got a bass line and some chords in a synthesizer as your backup band that you designed, as soon as you change from one chord to the next, everything will change with it. And besides the full control over the 8 tracks that you're building up as a pattern, the fact that you can change pitch with it makes these extremely powerful. It makes step sequencers look like the most primitive thing you've ever seen. That puts step sequencers in the Stone Age. When you can design your own style, like using the pattern sequencer in this Casio, you've got one of the best pieces of equipment in the world. Now, you may not have the best sounds in the Casio, but you certainly got the features to build expert type songs. And when you see the video that of me and what I designed, you'll see how that works. And what I did was just a very simple example. So the pattern sequencer is the main reason I am suggesting this keyboard, because it's unlimited creativity now. You're not stuck with a step sequencer. You're not stuck with anything to a grid. You're not stuck with 4/4 time. You're not stuck with the very shortness of a step sequencer. About the longest step sequencers out there on average are only 4 measures long of 16th notes. Now, a 1 measure step sequencer would be a 16 step. A 2 measure at the resolution of 16th notes is a 32, and a 4 is 64. So you have only 64 steps, and you're pretty much locked to the grid if you're step sequencing. You get to play freely if you want. You don't have to. You can when you play freely in the pattern sequencer, you can quantize right to the grid if you want. But you can also not quantize at all and play freely. And of course, if you're not interested in dance music and you want to write other time signatures like 3/4 or 7/8, step sequencers are not very well known for doing anything but 4/4 and 3/4. You want to throw something different in there, it's not going to like it. So like I said, unlimited creativity with this Casio pattern sequencer. Now, a lot of people look at these arrangers and they hear the built-in styles and they go, yeah, that's a cheesy sound, that's a crappy sound, why would I want that? Well, you don't. You don't want the factory presets. When you're composing your song, you're going to write your own style that fits your song, this specific song, perfectly. Now, the pattern sequencer on this cheaper one, now the other arrangers offer much, more expensive arrangers offer a lot more, something you might want to move to later. But this one offers only 2 main variations, 1 introduction, 1 ending, and 2 fills. Fills are 1 to 2 measures long, and it could be like just a transition time. It can be anything. It can be exactly like your main sequence, and just with a little different drum pattern, you know, like a drum roll or something in between. But at the same time, even though it looks like you have a lot of limitations there, if you look over on the right side of the keyboard where you store these setups, you will find there's registrations over there, and there's 4 registrations there. At a push of a button, you can have 2 more variations, 2 more intros, 2 more endings. And that means you can, with the 4 buttons there, you can do it live while the sequencers are playing. So that means instead of just 2 variations, you actually have 2 times 4 or 8 variations. Now you can make extremely complex sounds by just changing the variation. I'm going to have another video and an example on that where I just go crazy, absolutely crazy on my programming, and I do a big band sound where I'd use multiple registrations, so I had plenty of different options. I'll be doing that video later. Now, besides actual sound designing, we have layering tones. And just picking out 2 tones and layering them together is kind of a sound design. That's part of sound designing. You don't have to change the particular tone any at all. Or, once they're layered together, you go, hey, if this was just a little bit different, it would sound better. So you go in and edit, make a new tone, and then layer those 2 together. So with the Casio, you can layer two tones over each other, which is another very valuable sound design tool. Now you do get to play 3 tones at once when you have a split. When you split the keyboard between your chords playing on your left hand and your melody playing on the right hand, you can actually add a 3rd tone to your left hand. So even if the style sequencer, pattern sequencer wasn't running, you could be playing bass with your left hand and 2 overlaying tones with your right hand, or 1 tone and switching between the 2. Another very creative device. And if anybody's familiar with ARPs, which are arpeggiators, and harmonizers, you'll see the harmonizer really come into effect on that big band video I'm going to produce in a few days. With harmonizers, it can blend a number of instruments together in different pitches and things. So to get the big band sound that I needed on the next video I'm doing, I had to put some saxes and some trombones together in that big band sound. So the harmonizer automatically arranges it in that big band sound, and you get it without even having to program it. All you have to do is pick out the right one and then push the button and turn it on, and there it is. I think we've talked, I don't know if we talked about the organ, but for those Hammond organ users, of course, we got physical drawbars that you can just pull out and within seconds have your Hammond organ design sound ready to go. And you can save those as presets too. So if you're doing something really fast and you don't got time while you're playing to pull the stops out and set your Hammond organ, you can just go to a preset instead. Okay, so this is what this channel is about. This is all about synthesizers, and that don't mean we're only talking about $4,000 Moogs and Arturias. So I thought we'd start out very basic, just like the first concert video I put up. It's just a Roland Gaia synthesizer, which you don't make anymore, but it was a $600 synthesizer, and a very cheap Yamaha synth that that was only like 350 bucks. And that whole video was made out of that, plus the electribe was, chord electribe was used for rhythm. But in this video, we're using everything inside the box, nothing outside. The outputs are going straight to the recorder, and whatever you're hearing is being produced by this Casio. So I wanted to make this video for people that were new or, like me, had to restart life completely over. And this is a great way to keep your production skills up, keep your musician skills up, and spend very little money. And with this thing on sale today, it's $100 off at $350. If anybody wanted to start, now's the time. So let's get on to the video where I play this thing. Okay? Thanks.